The morning sun painted the sky above Haven's Rest in shades of gold and pink. Maria Santos watched from her apartment window as the city came to life below. Children walked to school while their parents hurried to work. Street vendors opened their stalls, filling the air with the smell of fresh bread and coffee. It was just another peaceful day on humanity's most successful colony world. Maria worked as a teacher at the Central School. She loved watching her students learn about Earth, their ancestral home that most of them would never see. Today she planned to show them videos of Earth's oceans. The children always got excited about the blue waves and white beaches that looked so different from Haven's Rest purple seas and silver sand. In the outer system, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant. Her fleet was conducting routine patrol exercises, keeping watch over the shipping lanes that connected Haven's Rest to other human worlds. Sarah had been born on Haven's Rest 30 years ago. Her daughter Emma still lived there, working as a doctor in the capital city of New Geneva. The day felt normal until the sensors started screaming. Lieutenant Torres turned from his station, his face pale. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures. Unknown ships dropping out of hyperspace." Sarah moved to the tactical display. Red dots appeared on the screen like drops of blood. Dozens of them, then hundreds. The ships were huge, much larger than anything in the human fleet. "Send a message to the unknown vessels," Sarah ordered. "This is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Space Force. You are entering human territory. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." The response came not in words but in weapons fire. The alien ships opened fire on Haven's Rest without warning. Beams of blue energy lanced down from orbit, striking the planet's surface. Where they hit, the ground turned to glass. Buildings that had stood for 50 years vanished in seconds. "My God," whispered Torres. "They're bombarding civilian targets." Sarah watched in horror as New Geneva disappeared under a barrage of energy weapons. The hospital where Emma worked. The school where Sarah had learned to read. The park where she had played as a child. All of it was burning. "All ships, full speed to Haven's Rest," Sarah commanded. "We have to help them." But her fleet was too far away. The alien ships had chosen their time well. By the time Sarah's ships could reach the planet, it would be too late. On the planet's surface, chaos ruled. Maria Santos threw herself under her desk as the school building shook. Through the window she could see the sky burning. Strange ships moved through the clouds like predators, their weapons turning everything below into fire and destruction. The emergency sirens wailed across the city. Maria could hear children crying in the hallways. She wanted to help them, but the building shook again, harder this time. Pieces of the ceiling fell like rain. She grabbed her emergency communicator and tried to call her sister on the other side of the city. Static filled the channel. All communications were down. Emma Chen ran through the hospital corridors as the building swayed around her. Injured people poured in from the streets. Burns, broken bones, people who had been caught in the open when the bombardment began. She worked frantically to help them, but there were too many. A nurse grabbed her arm. "Doctor, the building's structural supports are failing. We need to evacuate." Emma looked at the wounded people filling every bed and stretcher. "We can't leave them. We'll all die if we stay." The hospital shook again. Through the windows, Emma could see other buildings falling. The beautiful city where she had grown up was becoming a graveyard. In space, Admiral Sarah Chen watched helplessly as her home world died. The alien fleet was methodical in their destruction. They targeted power plants, water treatment facilities, communication centers. This was not a military strike. This was extermination. "Admiral," Torres called out, "I'm getting a weak signal from the planet. Someone's trying to broadcast on the emergency frequency." "Put it through." A man's voice crackled through the static. He sounded young, frightened. "This is Mayor Davidson of New Geneva. Our city is under attack by unknown forces. Civilian casualties are massive. We need immediate evacuation assistance. The orbital defense platforms are gone. I repeat, the orbital platforms are destroyed. We have no defenses left. The transmission cut to static." Sarah clenched her fists. Her ships were still hours away from Haven's Rest. By the time they arrived, there might be nothing left to save. The bombardment continued for 6 hours. The alien ships worked with terrible efficiency, turning a world of 12 million people into a burning wasteland. Cities that had taken decades to build were destroyed in minutes. When Sarah's fleet finally reached Haven's Rest, the alien ships were gone. They had vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. leaving only death behind them. The planet's surface glowed with residual heat from the bombardment. Where forests had grown, only ash remained. The oceans boiled with toxic chemicals released by destroyed industrial sites. The purple seas had turned black with soot and debris. Sarah authorized rescue shuttles to search for survivors. They found some, hiding in underground shelters or in the ruins of collapsed buildings. But out of 12 million people, fewer than 100,000 remained alive. Maria Santos was one of them. She had survived by hiding in the school's basement shelter. When the rescue teams found her 3 days later, she was dehydrated and in shock. The building above had collapsed completely, but the old shelter had held. Emma Chen was not so lucky. The hospital had taken a direct hit. By the time search teams reached the site, they found only twisted metal and melted stone. Sarah stood in the ruins, holding a piece of her daughter's medical badge. It was one of the few things that remained intact. The survivors were evacuated to other human worlds, but the damage went far beyond the physical destruction. Haven's Rest had been humanity's success story, proof that humans could build something beautiful among the stars. Now it was a graveyard, a warning of what could happen to any human world. News of the attack spread quickly through human space. Other colonies began building better defenses. Trade ships started traveling in armed convoys. The age of peaceful expansion was over. Sarah Chen stood in her quarters aboard the Defiant, staring out at the dead world below. She held her daughter's badge in her hands, feeling its weight. Emma had been 28 years old. She had wanted to have children someday, to raise them on the beautiful world where she had grown up. Now there would be no children, no future, no beautiful world. A knock came at her door. Torres entered carrying a data pad. "Admiral, we've received a message from Earth Command. They want a full report on the attack." Sarah took the pad and scrolled through the message. At the bottom, she found what she was looking for. Intelligence had identified the attacking force. They were called the Velthak Dominion, a militaristic empire that controlled dozens of star systems. According to the report, the Velthak considered humans to be an inferior species. The attack on Haven's Rest had been a demonstration, a message to humanity to stay within their designated boundaries. Sarah set down the datapad and looked out at her dead homeworld one more time. The Velthak thought they had sent a message. They had no idea what kind of message they would receive in return. The news from Haven's Rest reached Earth Command 3 days after the attack. President Martinez sat in the emergency session of the Global Defense Council, watching the recordings that Admiral Chen had transmitted. 12 million people dead in 6 hours, an entire world reduced to ash and glass. General Morrison spoke first. "The Velthak sent a message to our embassy on Centauri Prime. They claim Haven's Rest was built in what they consider their territory. They demand we evacuate all colonies beyond the Sol system." "Their territory?" President Martinez slammed his hand on the table. "Haven's Rest was settled 40 years ago. We filed all the proper claims with the Galactic Council. The Council has reviewed our complaint," continued Morrison. "They expressed sympathy for our losses but refused to take action. They say it's a territorial dispute between sovereign species. They won't interfere." Admiral Harrison, the head of Earth's military forces, stood up slowly. He was an old man who had served in the corporate wars 50 years earlier. "Mr. President, we all know what this really is. The Velthak are testing us. They want to see if humanity will fight back or just accept being pushed around." President Martinez looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. He saw anger in their eyes. Good. They would need that anger for what was coming. "Admiral Harrison, I want you to prepare for full military mobilization. Every shipyard, every factory, every resource we have. The Velthak want to see what humans do when pushed. We're going to show them." Within a week, every human world buzzed with activity. On Mars, the massive shipyards that usually built cargo vessels switched to producing warships. The asteroid miners of the belt began converting their huge hauler ships into weapons platforms. Earth's orbital factories worked around the clock, turning out weapons and ammunition. Admiral Sarah Chen returned to Earth to help plan the response. She met with engineers and tacticians, sharing everything her fleet had learned about Velthak technology, from analyzing the weapon signatures used at Haven's Rest. "Their energy weapons are more advanced than ours," reported Dr. Kim from the Weapons Development Division. "But they seem to rely heavily on shields for defense. If we can overload their shields, our kinetic weapons might penetrate." "What about their ship designs?" asked Sarah. Large, heavily armored, but not very maneuverable. They fight like they expect their enemies to meet them head-on in traditional battle formations. Sarah smiled grimly. Then they've never fought humans before. The mobilization was unlike anything in human history. Colony worlds that had been peaceful. Farming communities began producing weapons and armor. Luxury passenger ships were converted into troop transports. Even civilian mining equipment was modified into weapons of war. Maria Santos, one of the survivors from Haven's Rest, found herself working in a weapons factory on New Madrid. She had been a teacher, but now she spent her days assembling targeting computers for missile systems. Every circuit she connected, every component she installed, was for the ships that would carry vengeance to the Valtak. My students always asked me what Earth was like, she told her co-worker during a break. I told them it was a beautiful world where humans learned to dream of the stars. Now I want to teach the Valtak something different. I want to teach them what happens when you murder children. The retrofitting of civilian ships created new types of weapons never seen before in galactic warfare. Asteroid mining ships designed to crack open space rocks became massive kinetic bombardment platforms. Their industrial fusion charges meant for mining were converted into ship-killing bombs. Captain Rodriguez commanded one such converted vessel, the former asteroid processor Lucky Strike. His ship now carried a cargo hold full of modified mining charges, each one capable of destroying a Valtak cruiser. It's not pretty, he told his crew as they practiced attack runs. But it doesn't need to be pretty. It just needs to work. The human fleet grew day by day, not just military vessels, but a collection of converted civilian ships that looked like nothing any alien species had ever seen. Cargo haulers bristling with missile pods, passenger liners with armor welded to their hulls, mining ships loaded with enough explosives to crack a moon. Other species in the galaxy watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern. The Althari Union, humanity's closest allies, sent diplomatic messages urging caution. We understand your anger over Haven's Rest, Ambassador Veltar transmitted from their homeworld. But the Valthak Dominion is one of the most powerful military forces in this sector. A direct confrontation would be suicide for humanity. Perhaps negotiation. President Martinez cut off the transmission before the ambassador could finish. There would be no negotiation with the species that murdered 12 million innocent people. As the fleet prepared, human intelligence agencies worked to gather information about Valtak territory. They learned that the Dominion controlled over 40 star systems, with their homeworld deep in the center of their space. Their military was built around massive battleships supported by countless smaller vessels. They have us outnumbered 50-1, reported Intelligence Director Vance during a strategy meeting. Numbers aren't everything, replied Admiral Chen. They think like a conventional military. They expect their enemies to follow the same rules they do. We're going to fight like humans. The plan that emerged from those meetings was unlike any military strategy ever attempted. Instead of massing their forces for a single large battle, the human fleet would split into dozens of smaller task forces. They would strike simultaneously at Valthak colonies across their territory, hitting fast and hard before jumping to the next target. The converted civilian ships would be crucial to this strategy. They could carry massive amounts of supplies and weapons, allowing the fleet to operate far from human territory for extended periods. Training began immediately. Human pilots practiced new tactics designed specifically to fight the Valthak. They learned to use their ship's smaller size and greater maneuverability to avoid the enemy's heavy weapons. They practiced coordinated attacks where multiple ships would focus fire on a single target, overwhelming its defenses through sheer volume of fire. The alien observers who watched these exercises were puzzled by what they saw. The human ships moved in patterns that seemed random, almost chaotic. They attacked from unexpected angles and retreated when conventional wisdom said they should press their advantage. They fight like madmen, reported one Zelian observer to his government. No discipline, no proper formation. They'll be slaughtered if they try this against the Valthak. But Admiral Chen knew something the aliens didn't understand. Humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They had learned every trick of war, every way to gain an advantage over a superior enemy. Now they would use all that knowledge against the Valthak. 6 months after Haven's Rest, the human fleet was ready. Over 2,000 ships of all sizes, from mighty battle cruisers to converted cargo haulers. The largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Retribution. Around her, officers made final preparations for departure. In a few hours, they would jump to hyperspace and begin their journey to Veltac territory. She thought about her daughter Emma, killed in the ruins of Haven's Rest. She thought about the 12 million people who had died that day, and all the other humans who might die if the Veltac weren't stopped. "All ships report ready for jump," announced her communications officer. Sarah looked out at the fleet surrounding her flagship. These weren't just military vessels. They were the combined will of humanity made manifest. Every ship represented someone's home, someone's family, someone's dreams for the future. "Signal the fleet," she commanded. "All ships, jump on my mark." The space around them filled with the blue-white flash of hyperspace windows opening. One by one, the ships of humanity's vengeance disappeared into the void, carrying with them the promise that Haven's Rest would not be forgotten. The Velthac colony world of Kethmar had never known war. For 3 centuries, it had served as a peaceful industrial center, producing weapons and ships for the Dominion's military forces. The blue-skinned inhabitants went about their daily lives without fear, secure in the knowledge that their mighty fleet protected them from any possible threat. Commander Thysic commanded the orbital defense platform that watched over Kethmar. It was mostly ceremonial duty. No enemy had ever penetrated this deep into Velthac space. The platform's weapons had never been fired except during training exercises. That changed when the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. "Alert! Alert! Unknown ships detected!" The sensor operator's voice cracked with surprise. Multiple contacts, various sizes and configurations. Thysic rushed to the tactical display. What he saw made no sense. The human ships didn't arrange themselves in proper battle formation. Instead, they scattered in all directions, moving in seemingly random patterns. "How many ships?" he demanded. "I count 47 vessels, Commander. But their formations are strange. They appear to be civilian vessels modified for combat." Thysic activated the communication system. "Unknown vessels, this is Velthac Defense Command. You are in violation of Dominion space. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." The response came from a human female, her voice cold as space itself. "This is Admiral Chen of the human fleet. We are here to collect payment for Haven's Rest. You have 30 seconds to evacuate all civilian personnel to the planet's surface." "Impossible. We do not negotiate with inferior species. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." The human admiral's image appeared on the communication screen. Thysic was surprised to see that she looked almost sad despite her words. 30 seconds are up." The human attack began like nothing Thysic had ever witnessed. The converted cargo ships moved first, launching massive salvos of missiles that filled space with expanding clouds of metal and fire. But these weren't normal military missiles. They were mining charges, designed to crack open asteroids, now programmed to seek out Velthac ships. The defense platform's shields flared as dozens of explosions bloomed against them. The shields held, but already warning lights were flashing across the control board. "Return fire," Thysic ordered. "Target their largest vessels." The platform's heavy beam weapons lanced out toward the human ships. But the humans weren't where they were supposed to be. The small, fast ships had scattered, making them almost impossible to target. The larger vessels used the smaller ones as cover, hiding behind their chaotic movements. A converted mining ship, the Asteroid Breaker, swooped down toward the defense platform. Its captain, former asteroid miner Jack Harrison, had spent 20 years learning how to place charges exactly where they would do the most damage. "Remember, boys," he told his crew over the intercom, "we're not trying to win pretty. We're just trying to win." The Asteroid Breaker launched a spread of modified mining charges directly at the platform's shield generators. The explosions that followed weren't elegant or sophisticated. They were just incredibly destructive. The defense platform's shields failed completely. Thysic watched in horror as his mighty fortress became helpless. The human ships swarmed around it like angry insects, their weapons tearing into unprotected armor. Within minutes, the platform that had protected Kethmar for 3 centuries was a burning wreck falling toward the planet below. But the humans weren't finished. As the platform burned, the converted passenger liner New Horizon moved into orbit around Kethmar. Its captain, Maria Santos, looked down at the industrial facilities that covered the planet's surface. "Target the weapon manufacturing centers," she ordered her weapons officer. "Avoid civilian areas, but make sure their war machine stops working." The New Horizon had been a luxury cruise ship before the war. Now its elegant dining halls were filled with missile launchers and its observation decks mounted heavy cannons. It was ugly and improvised, but it was also devastatingly effective. The ship's weapons reached down to the planet's surface, turning weapons factories into molten craters. Within an hour, Kethmar's industrial capacity was reduced to smoking ruins. Similar scenes played out across 17 Velthak worlds simultaneously. The human fleet had split into multiple task forces, each one targeting a different colony. The attack was coordinated down to the minute, with all task forces striking at exactly the same time. On the mining world of Vexthar, Captain Rodriguez brought his converted asteroid processor Lucky Strike against the planet's orbital refineries. The massive ships that had once processed space rocks now used their industrial equipment to tear apart Velthak installations. It's like using a sledgehammer to swat flies, Rodriguez told his crew as they watched another refinery break apart under their weapons. But sometimes that's exactly what you need. The Velthak military response was slow and confused. Their commanders had expected humanity to mass their forces for a traditional battle. Instead, they found themselves facing attacks from multiple directions by ships that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Admiral Kesevar commanded the Velthak Third Fleet from his flagship, the mighty dreadnought Dominion's Fury. When the first reports of human attacks came in, he immediately ordered his fleet to respond. How can primitive humans attack 17 worlds at once? He demanded of his intelligence officer. Their entire fleet couldn't be more than a few hundred ships. Sir, our latest intelligence estimates put the human fleet at over 2,000 vessels. Most appear to be converted civilian ships. Kesevar laughed bitterly. Civilian ships? What kind of military uses cargo haulers and passenger liners as warships? The kind that's currently destroying our colonies, sir. By the time Velthak reinforcements arrived at any of the attacked worlds, the humans were already gone. They jumped to hyperspace as soon as their objectives were complete, leaving behind burning installations and a message that could not be ignored. The pattern was always the same. The humans would drop out of hyperspace, destroy the orbital defenses with overwhelming firepower, target military and industrial facilities on the planet, then disappear before reinforcements could arrive. What shocked the Velthak most was the humans' complete disregard for conventional military doctrine. They used cargo ships as bombers, passenger liners as battleships, and mining vessels as assault craft. Their formations were chaotic, their tactics unpredictable, and their weapons improvised from industrial equipment. But it worked. Within 72 hours, 17 Velthak worlds had been attacked. Billions of credits worth of military infrastructure lay in ruins. The supposedly impregnable defenses of the Dominion had been shattered by an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever faced. On the Velthak homeworld of Thisara, the High Command met in emergency session. Military leaders who had never known defeat struggled to understand what had happened to them. "They fight like madmen," reported Admiral Kesevar. "No discipline, no honor, no proper tactics. They use whatever works, regardless of how crude or unconventional it might be." "But it is working," pointed out General Vextall. "Our colonies are burning, our fleets are scattered, and we still don't know where they'll strike next." Supreme Commander Thisik, leader of all Velthak military forces, studied the tactical displays showing the locations of the attacks. The humans had struck at random targets across a wide area, making it impossible to predict their next move. "Send a message to the human government," he ordered. "We are willing to negotiate a settlement to this conflict." The response came from Admiral Chen herself, transmitted from somewhere in deep space. "There will be no negotiation. You murdered 12 million innocent people. Now you'll learn what happens when you attack humanity. We can offer compensation for Haven's Rest," Thisik continued. "Credits, technology, even territory if necessary. There is no amount of money that will bring back the dead. There is no technology that will rebuild what you destroyed. This isn't about territory or resources. This is about teaching the galaxy a lesson. When you attack humans, we attack back, and we don't stop until our enemies can never threaten us again." The transmission ended, leaving the Velthak leaders staring at blank screens. For the first time in their history, the mighty Dominion faced an enemy that couldn't be bought, negotiated with, or intimidated. In space, the human fleet regrouped for their next phase of attacks. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as her ships prepared for battle once again. The first strikes had been successful beyond their wildest hopes, but she knew the real test was still to come. "Ma'am," reported her communications officer, "we're receiving messages from other alien governments. The Zelian Republic is offering to mediate. The Althari Union is requesting an immediate ceasefire. The Galactic Council wants to hold emergency sessions." "Ignore them all," Sarah replied. "The galaxy had their chance to help when Haven's Rest burned. Now they can watch while we handle our own problems." She looked out at the fleet surrounding her flagship. These ships and their crews had already accomplished something no one thought possible. They had made the Valthak Dominion, one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, afraid. But they weren't finished yet. The real message was still to be delivered. News of the human attack spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. On 100 worlds and 1,000 meeting halls, alien leaders gathered to discuss the impossible thing that had happened. Humanity, the young species that most considered barely more than clever animals, had bloodied the nose of the mighty Valthak Dominion. Ambassador Veltar of the Althari Union called an emergency session of his government's ruling council. The blue-skinned delegates gathered in their crystal chambers, their usually calm expressions showing deep concern. "The humans have lost their minds," declared Council Leader Thasani. "Their attacks on Velthak territory are completely unprovoked." "Unprovoked?" Veltar's tentacles writhed in agitation. The Valthak destroyed an entire human world. 12 million dead in a single day. How is retaliation unprovoked? The Haven's Rest incident was a territorial dispute. The Galactic Council has procedures for such matters. The Council offered sympathy and did nothing. Now the humans are handling the matter themselves. And suddenly everyone is concerned about proper procedures. On the Zelian homeworld, President Kesmore watched recordings of the human attacks with growing alarm. The footage showed human ships fighting with a desperation and creativity that made his military advisors nervous. "They converted cargo ships into bombers," reported his defense minister. "Passenger liners into battleships. They're using industrial mining equipment as weapons of war. It's completely insane. But effective," Kesmore pointed out. "In 3 days they've done more damage to the Valthak than anyone has managed in a century. Maybe we should reconsider our own military doctrine." "Sir, you can't be serious. Fighting like barbarians might work in the short term, but civilized warfare requires—" "Civilized warfare?" Kesmore's voice turned cold. "Tell me, Minister, how civilized was the bombardment of Haven's Rest? How civilized is it to murder children in their schools?" While the galaxy debated, the Valthak prepared for war. Supreme Commander Thyssek called back every ship from the outer territories, massing the largest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. Over 3,000 vessels, including the massive super dreadnoughts that served as mobile fortresses. "We will end this human infestation once and for all," he declared to his officers. "Their crude tactics may have worked against isolated colonies, but they cannot stand against the full might of the Dominion." The plan was simple and direct. The combined Valthak fleet would advance into human space, destroying every world and ship they found. Humanity would be wiped out completely, ensuring they could never threaten the Dominion again. Admiral Kesevar, commanding the advance fleet, had studied every recording of the human attacks. "They are dangerous precisely because they are unpredictable," he warned. "We must not underestimate them. They are animals with weapons," replied General Vextol. "Dangerous in the same way that a cornered beast is dangerous. But animals can be put down." The Valthak fleet began its advance toward human territory, confident in their overwhelming numerical superiority. They expected to find the human fleet somewhere near the border, probably trying to defend one of their colony worlds. They found nothing. Human space appeared to be completely empty. Every colony had been evacuated, every ship had vanished. The Valthak advanced deeper into human territory, finding only ghost towns and abandoned mining stations. "Where are they?" demanded Thyssek as his fleet approached the Sol system itself. "Are they hiding behind their home world like cowards?" The answer came when they reached Earth's outer planets. Admiral Chen's voice echoed across all communication frequencies transmitted from somewhere in the darkness between the stars. "Welcome to human space, Valthak. You came here to finish what you started at Haven's Rest, but you made one mistake. You assumed we would fight you the way you expect to be fought." Suddenly, space erupted with light and fire. Human ships appeared from everywhere and nowhere, dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation around the Valthak fleet. They had been hiding in the outer system, using captured cloaking technology and the cold darkness of space to remain invisible. But these weren't the same ships that had attacked the Velthak colonies. In the months since those first strikes, human engineers had been busy. The crude modifications and improvised weapons had been refined, improved, and integrated into purpose-built killing machines. The former cargo ship Deep Hauler now bristled with so many weapons that it looked like a metal porcupine. Captain Martinez, who had spent 15 years carrying grain between colony worlds, now commanded a vessel that could destroy a Velthak cruiser with a single salvo. Remember, the children of Haven's Rest, he told his crew over the intercom as they launched their first missile spread. The human fleet attacked from all directions at once. The converted civilian ships, now veteran warriors, knew exactly how to use their unconventional designs against traditional military vessels. They swarmed through the Velthak formation like sharks through a school of fish. The mining ship Asteroid Cracker lived up to its name, ramming its reinforced prow directly into the side of a Velthak battleship. The impact tore both ships apart, but the mining vessel's crew had already evacuated in escape pods. They had turned their entire ship into a guided missile. Admiral Kesevar watched from his bridge as his carefully planned formation dissolved into chaos. The humans weren't fighting a battle. They were conducting a slaughter. "They're everywhere," shouted his tactical officer. "I count over 1,500 human vessels, but our sensors keep losing track of them. How is that possible?" "They're using some kind of stealth technology. The ships appear and disappear at will." The stealth technology was actually quite simple. Human engineers had studied the wreckage from Haven's Rest and learned to copy Velthak cloaking devices. But they used them in ways the Velthak had never considered, not to hide entire fleets, but to allow individual ships to strike and vanish like ghosts. Maria Santos commanded the former luxury liner Star Princess, now equipped with enough firepower to level a city. She watched through her view screen as Velthak ships tried desperately to form defensive formations. "Target their command ships first," she ordered her weapons officer. "Cut off their heads and the body will follow." The Star Princess decloaked directly behind a Velthak fleet command vessel, its elegant hull now bristling with missile launchers and beam weapons. The enemy ship died before its crew even knew they were under attack. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Velthak fleet had been designed to fight other traditional military forces, against an enemy that used cargo ships as bombers, passenger liners as battleships, and mining vessels as guided missiles. Their conventional tactics were worse than useless. Supreme Commander Thisek abandoned his flagship when it became clear the battle was lost. As his escape pod drifted through the debris field that had once been the pride of the Velthak fleet, he listened to the human admiral's final message. "Let this be a lesson to any species that considers attacking humanity." Admiral Chen's voice rang across all frequencies. "We don't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want to conquer other worlds. We just want to live in peace. But if you force war upon us, we will show you why humans are the most dangerous species you will ever encounter." The defeat of the Velthak fleet sent shockwaves through the galaxy. In one day, humanity had destroyed the most powerful military force in their sector of space. The supposedly inferior species had proven they were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. On the Althari homeworld, Council Leader Thessani called an emergency session. "We must offer our full support to humanity immediately. If they can do this to the Velthak, what could they do to us?" Ambassador Veltar, who had been warning about underestimating humans for months, allowed himself a small smile. "I told you they were more than they appeared to be." The Zelian Republic immediately began drafting alliance proposals. The Corvan Confederacy offered to share military technology. Even the proud hegemony of Suns, who had previously considered humans to be beneath their notice, sent diplomatic messages expressing their desire for peaceful relations. But Admiral Chen was not finished. The human fleet regrouped and began advancing toward the Velthak homeworld of Thisara. The message was clear. This would not end until the Dominion could never threaten humanity again. "Sir," reported the communications officer aboard the Retribution, "we're receiving surrender offers from a dozen Velthak colonies. They're willing to declare independence from the Dominion if we spare them." "Accept their surrenders," Sarah replied. "Any Velthak who renounce the Dominion and promise to never attack human worlds will be spared. The others..." She looked out at her fleet, now composed of battle-hardened veterans who had learned to turn cargo ships into instruments of war. The others will learn why it was a mistake to murder our children. The human fleet continued its advance toward the heart of the Velthak Dominion, leaving behind a trail of burning warships in a galaxy that would never again make the mistake of underestimating humanity's capacity for vengeance. The siege of Thisara began on a quiet morning when the planet's 3 suns cast long shadows across the crystal spires of the Velthak capital. Citizens went about their daily routines, though many paused to look up at the sky with worried expressions. Everyone knew the humans were coming, but the planet's defenses were the strongest in the galaxy. Surely they would hold. They were wrong. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution as her fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation around the Velthak homeworld. 2,000 ships spread out across the system like a net, each one positioned to prevent any escape. Supreme Commander Thisik, commanding the last intact Velthak fleet from the orbital fortress of Kethmara, watched the human ships with growing despair. He had spent months analyzing their tactics, trying to understand how they had defeated the mighty Dominion so completely. They don't fight like soldiers, he had concluded. They fight like survivors. Every battle is life or death to them, so they use whatever works, regardless of honor or tradition. The humans had learned much since their first crude attacks on the outer colonies. Their ships were no longer obviously converted civilian vessels. The weapons and armor had been integrated seamlessly, creating hybrid warships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Rodriguez still commanded the Lucky Strike, but the former asteroid processor now looked like a purpose-built warship. Its mining equipment had been replaced with military-grade weapons systems, though it retained the massive cargo capacity that made it so effective at carrying heavy ordnance. "It's strange," he told his crew as they took position around the planet. 6 months ago we were cracking rocks for ore. Now we're about to end an interstellar empire." The battle began with a message from Admiral Chen, broadcast on all frequencies so every being in the system could hear it. "People of Thisara, this is Admiral Chen of the human fleet. Your military leaders chose to attack and destroy our peaceful colony of Haven's Rest, murdering 12 million innocent people. Today we have come to collect the final payment for that crime." She paused, looking out at the beautiful blue-green world below. Despite everything, Sarah felt no joy at what was about to happen. War was never something to celebrate, even when it was necessary. "We offer terms to any Velthak who renounce the actions of their military. Surrender now. Help us locate and arrest the leaders responsible for Haven's Rest and you will be spared. Continue to resist and you will share their fate." The response came from Supreme Commander Thisik himself. "Humans, you have proven yourselves to be formidable warriors. But this is our homeworld. We will defend it to the last ship, the last soldier, the last breath." "So be it," Sarah replied. The orbital defenses of Thisara were the most advanced in Velthak space, massive particle beam cannons that could destroy a battleship with a single shot, shield generators powerful enough to protect entire continents, fortress stations that had never been conquered in 3 centuries of warfare. The humans bypassed them all. Instead of attacking the defenses directly, they began launching thousands of small objects toward the planet. At first, the Velthak thought they were missiles or bombs. The defensive systems engaged, destroying target after target with precise beam fire, but the objects weren't weapons. They were communication devices, each one broadcasting the same message in the Velthak language. "Your leaders caused the deaths of 12 million humans, including children. Help us arrest them, and you will be spared." Maria Santos had suggested the idea during a strategy meeting. Not everyone on Thisara supported the attack on Haven's Rest, she had argued. "Give the civilians a chance to surrender before we start shooting." The effect was immediate. Across the planet, Velthak civilians began transmitting location data for military installations. Anti-government groups that had been suppressed for decades saw an opportunity to overthrow their oppressors. Within hours, civil war erupted on the surface. "Brilliant," murmured Captain Harrison aboard the asteroid breaker. "Turn their own people against them. Humans have been doing that for centuries." The orbital defenses designed to fight external enemies were helpless against internal rebellion. Sabotage groups disabled power plants and communication centers. Civilian workers abandoned their posts at military installations. The careful coordination that made the defenses so effective began to break down. Supreme Commander Thisik watched his homeworld tear itself apart, and realized he had made a terrible mistake. The humans hadn't just brought weapons to Thyssara. They had brought an idea that leaders who murdered innocent people deserved to be overthrown. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "we're receiving surrender requests from 12 major cities. They're offering to turn over local military commanders in exchange for protection." "Cowards and traitors," Thysik snarled, but privately he wondered if they might be right. Had the attack on Haven's Rest really been worth this? The human fleet moved with careful precision, accepting surrenders and protecting civilian areas while systematically destroying military targets. They had learned the difference between soldiers and innocents, between those who made war and those who suffered from it. Admiral Kesevar, commanding the last functional orbital fortress, tried one final desperate attack. His remaining ships charged toward the human fleet in a traditional battle formation, hoping to break through their lines and escape to friendly territory. The humans met them halfway, but not with the chaotic swarming tactics they had used before. Instead, they fought with deadly precision, their converted civilian ships working together like parts of a single vast machine. The former luxury cruise ship Star Princess worked in perfect coordination with the mining vessel, Deep Core, and the cargo hauler Long Haul. 3 ships that had never been designed to fight together, now operating like they had trained for years as a unit. It was over in 20 minutes. The last Veilthak fleet was destroyed, its remnants scattered across space like broken toys. With the orbital defenses neutralized and the fleet destroyed, Admiral Chen issued her final ultimatum: surrender Supreme Commander Thysik and the other leaders responsible for Haven's Rest. You have 6 hours to comply. The response came not from the government, but from a group of Veilthak civilians who had taken control of the capital city. "Admiral Chen, this is Citizen Velthar, leader of the Thyssara Freedom Movement. We have arrested the war criminals you seek. We are ready to turn them over to human justice." Sarah felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness as she watched Veilthak transports bring the captured leaders to her flagship. Justice would finally be done for the victims of Haven's Rest, but the cost had been enormous. Hundreds of worlds had burned, millions had died, and an entire civilization had been brought to its knees. The trials of the Veilthak leadership were broadcast across the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, a species was being held accountable for genocide by their victims. The proceedings were fair but thorough, with evidence presented in careful detail. Supreme Commander Thysik stood before the tribunal, his blue skin pale with defeat. "We acted according to our understanding of military necessity," he said in his defense. "The human colony was established in territory we considered ours." Admiral Chen, serving as the chief prosecutor, looked at him with cold eyes. "Military necessity does not justify the murder of children. Territorial disputes do not justify genocide. You ordered the deaths of 12 million innocent people to make a political point. There is no defense for that." The verdicts were unanimous: guilty of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against the peace of the galaxy. The sentences were life imprisonment on a prison world established specifically for this purpose. With their leadership in human custody, the remnants of the Veilthak Dominion collapsed completely. Dozens of former colonies declared independence. Others requested protection from various alien governments. A few asked to join the growing human confederation that was emerging from the ashes of the war. The galaxy watched these events with a mixture of awe and fear. In less than a year, humanity had gone from being considered a minor species to becoming one of the most powerful forces in their sector of space. More importantly, they had established new rules about how war would be conducted. Ambassador Veltar of the Althari Union arrived at Earth 3 months after the fall of Thyssara. He met with President Martinez in the rebuilt Global Defense Council chambers, offering a formal alliance between their species. "Your people have changed the galaxy," he told the human leader. "Not just through military force, but through the ideas you brought with you. The concept of holding leaders accountable for atrocities committed against civilians. The idea that even in war there are lines that cannot be crossed." President Martinez looked out the window at Earth's orbital shipyards, where the last of the converted civilian vessels were being refitted for peaceful purposes. "We never wanted to change the galaxy. We just wanted to live in peace. But when peace was denied to you, you showed the galaxy what happens when humans are pushed too far. Other species are reconsidering their own military doctrines. The Corvin Confederacy has abolished orbital bombardment of civilian targets. The hegemony of suns has established civilian protection protocols for all their military forces. The changes weren't limited to military matters. Trade agreements that had previously favored the older, more established species were renegotiated to be more equitable. The Galactic Council, which had ignored humanity's pleas for help after Haven's Rest, now sought human input on every major decision. We would like to offer humanity permanent seats on the Council's ruling body, Veltar continued. Your voice deserves to be heard in galactic affairs. President Martinez shook his head. We appreciate the offer, but we've learned not to trust others with our security. We'll participate in galactic affairs, but we'll maintain our own defenses. 1 year after the destruction of Haven's Rest, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the memorial garden built on the site of New Geneva. 12 million names were carved into black stone walls that stretched for miles across the former city. Her daughter Emma's name was there, along with all the other victims of Valthak aggression. Sarah wasn't alone. Thousands of other survivors and veterans had come to pay their respects. Maria Santos was there, no longer a weapons factory worker but now serving as Earth's ambassador to the former Valthak territories. Captain Rodriguez had brought his family to see the memorial, his children playing quietly among the flowers that grew between the name-covered walls. Was it worth it? Asked Captain Harrison, the old asteroid miner who had commanded the asteroid breaker through the entire war. All the fighting, all the destruction? Sarah considered the question as she looked at her daughter's name carved in stone. Emma always believed in helping people, making the galaxy a safer place for everyone. I think she would say yes, it was worth it. Not for revenge, but for the future. The human fleet that had once terrorized the galaxy was mostly dismantled now, its ships converted back to civilian use or integrated into the smaller but permanent human defense force. The cargo haulers went back to carrying grain and manufactured goods between colony worlds. The passenger liners resumed their peaceful routes, carrying tourists and immigrants to new homes among the stars. But everyone in the galaxy remembered what those innocent-looking ships could become when humanity was threatened. The lesson of Haven's Rest had been learned. Humans were peaceful by choice, not by necessity. When that peace was shattered, they would respond with devastating effectiveness. Trade routes that had been dominated by established species for centuries now included human ships as equal partners. Colony worlds that had been vulnerable to attack by militaristic neighbors now flew under human protection. The young species that had been dismissed as insignificant had become the guardians of galactic peace. As Sarah walked through the memorial garden, she reflected on how much had changed. Humanity had paid a terrible price to earn respect among the stars, but they had also created a galaxy where no other species would suffer the fate of Haven's Rest. The names on the walls would never be forgotten. Neither would the lesson they had taught the galaxy, that even the smallest and youngest species could become the most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose and everything to protect.